Great stories, cool stuff, and it's for sale. This is our eBay listing video, and we have 20 really fun items to show you. Just keep on finding interesting things. Some of them are things that have been talked about a lot on YouTube that I haven't had before, and here's one now. This is a Glassy baby, my first ever. I have never really looked for Glassy babies because they weren't really very vintage, but now they've been out for 30 years. And there isn't a way that you can tell the older ones from the newer ones, and that is a little etching that would be near the bottom called a Trisculon. They added that in 2019. This does not have it. And if you look on the bottom, there's the Glassy baby studio mark. Glassy baby turns out to have a connection to Seattle, where I am as I'm filming this, and where these things are going to be sent from this month. And that surprised me. I did not realize that there was a Northwest connection. A woman named Lee Rhodes and her husband Emery, who is a glassmaker, well, Lee had cancer 30 years ago, and her husband wanted to make nice little votive candle holders for tea lights and things that would soothe her during her treatments. And so he came up with all of this, and it helped, and her cancer went away, and she was very excited about the notion that they could continue to make these, sell them for a profit, and then donate some of the proceeds to cancer research, which they still do. It really took off. It got discovered that at one point they had stores in California and New York. Recently, they built and opened a hot shop in Livingston, Montana. They are still sold primarily in Seattle and in the Portland area. And this one is called Pink Goodness. I think I have that right. And they are very pretty and they are very good quality. They're cased glass. It takes between 3 and 5 glass blowers to make this. They spend about 15 minutes on each one, which is pretty amazing when you think, well, a machine could stamp something out in about 30 seconds, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't have this level of quality. It wouldn't have this weight and this heft. They're very good about the way that they mix the colors. Their son actually writes a little card of poetry to go with each one nowadays. This is an early one and does not have that. It's just Glassy baby by itself. This one we are starting at just $9.99. We do have a buy it now of $65 because that's about what they go for new, and that's about what they're selling for online. So we'll see how this one does. I think it's very pretty. A lot of people use them as drinking glasses now too. This next piece also has a Northwest connection that I did not realize when I bought it. I bought it in Salt Lake City, Utah. It is the USS President Roosevelt, and this was an award given to somebody who won a costume party at some point around 1960. These ship models as awards and desk pieces and paperweights were very popular to make in the 50s and 60s. They're quite heavy and substantial. It's just white metal, zinc and lead and all those sorts of things. But this ship, yes, did look exactly like this. That bent stack in the middle was bent originally because the President Roosevelt was originally a World War II ship for troop carrying, and it was called the General W.P. Richardson. It worked for several cruise lines. American President in Seattle bought it in about 1960 and refitted her as a cruise ship and ran her for about 10 years. And that was during the time when they would have events and people would win these as awards. So they weren't given out to everybody. They were a special thing. I think it's really cool looking. Somebody who's into nautical stuff, somebody who's into paperweights, somebody who's into steamship collectibles. There's a few different people who would be the collector for these. And collectors today are building fleets of them. You can get several with the same ship for different awards, or you can get different ships and have a whole flotilla. So I think they're really neat. There's the underside. This one is going to start at $29.99. I have a buy it now of $59. They do often sell for that price, and I think they're just really cool. It's the first time I've had one of these as well. The next piece we have for sale is very naughty, but she doesn't seem so on the surface. On the surface, she's a lovely little celluloid flapper, and she is in the form of a pocket mirror. And you can see how it would be used, because the lovely lady in this picture, well, she's holding up a pocket mirror and checking out her flapper bob and her lovely mantle and all of her jewelry. It's about 2 inches around. There's the mirror. It's a little cloudy, but it's all there and it's not scratched or broken. Men thought these were really funny because when you turn it upside down, well, it appears that she's doing something very naughty. You won't see it when you turn it upside down this way. It's tame because you see the full figure. But if you cover up the head and the hand and then look, well, it looks like you're getting a bit of a show. It was a very vulgar thing for the 1920s, and they are considered very funny as a comic gag gift now. And because of that, this one has become pretty popular. They did make a lot of them. It fooled a lot of people in the time, and it is still an eye fooler now. I like anything trompe-l'oeil that is meant to fool the eye, but this one is rather risque about it. We are starting this at $20. We have a buy it now of $30. They typically sell in that range. They were for rather roguish men of that time period, and maybe today as well. I've been at a few estate sales lately where viewers have said, oh, there was a room full of sewing stuff. Oh, there were some things in there that were probably vintage. And I do understand that sewing implements can be rather valuable. And this one is particularly neat because this is Victorian era. And this is the Magnolia needle case. Registered trademark. It has a little pin cushion on top, which has been used very little. You see a little bit of a disturbance there. The Magnolia needle case was made in Germany, and this is the fancier of two versions I've seen of this, but they both have the same information on the back, where they talk about being made in Germany, and they talk about how you turn the dial and then you get the size needle that you want from underneath the bulb. And what they mean by that is you lift off the pincushion portion, and in here, just like they had in big general stores for big knitting needles, well, you have a little round case with a hole in it, and you turn the dial, and whatever size needle you want is in that portion. So you want a number 6, you turn the hole to number 6, and out comes a number 6, a number 7, a number 8. These are really, really interesting to me, and you don't see a lot of these. And you especially don't see them in very good condition. It's just a little thing, 3 inches tall. Generally, when we see these, they just said needle case. And so Magnolia came along, and Magnolia was a firm that sold sewing implements and other sewing notions, and they had their business name put on it. So this one's a little fancier and a little bit more special. You can tell by the way it's turned by a machine. This dates to approximately 1890, and it's a pretty scarce piece, and there is good collector interest in these. We're going to start it at $39. I have seen them sell for as much as $100 before. So we'll put this out and see how high it goes and see who else loves sewing implements. We used to have a dealer in Oregon who had a ton of interesting Victorian sewing implements, and yet I don't remember her having this case more than maybe once in the 10 years I was associated with them. Some of you folks recently saw me pick this up at an estate sale in Washington State, and I did it deliberately so that I could put this on eBay because this is such a hard hand-painted early Stangle dinnerware piece to find. This is on the Colonial blank, which was introduced in 1935 in solid colors like bright oranges and other poppy colors of the day to compete with Bauer and the other West Coast potteries that were setting the new trends in the market. But this one is the Newport sailboat. And Newport sailboat is really difficult to find. First of all, it was all hand painted, and it took several layers of hand painting because you see lighter colors and darker colors. They had to mask part of it so that the paint didn't run, and even though they could fire it in one step, the painting itself was rather painstaking. Stangle was a descendant of the Fulper Pottery Company in New Jersey, and Fulper was known for really interesting glazes. Stangle ended up being known for hand painting because they didn't do the crystalline glazes or some of the other things that Fulper did, but they did do a lot of painted dinnerware over the years, and this was one of the earliest patterns. You just don't see a lot of this because this came out in the Depression. It was expensive. Its name is based on Newport, Rhode Island, after all, and people just couldn't afford it, but it is beautiful. You rarely see these plates for sale. Here's the Stangle mark on the back, and you see that they were proud enough of it that they let the artist put their initials on it. So this is hand painted by RV. So this one's a pretty neat one. It is the 10-inch dinner plate, so the largest piece that they made in the place settings at the time. This piece could easily sell for $50 to $75. We're going to start it at $29.99 and see where the customers are, but it is a hard one to get. And because it was expensive and complicated to make, it did not stay in the line very long. I bought a big collection of playing cards from an estate in Portland, Oregon, and one of the decks I thought was especially interesting is this one. This is from the Albina Shipyard in North Portland, and it says, Albina Hell Shipyard, builders of hell for Hitler. This is very dramatic. They are showing this ship that they are building going into battle and blowing up a German vessel. So very graphic, very much from the war. It has all of the cards, including the Joker, and that's important because there was a period of time where collecting just the Jokers out of decks became popular because playing cards were not an expensive thing. They were things that were done as novelties and souvenirs and were easy to get, and they were given away on train cars and in planes and all sorts of places. So they were not something that was particularly prized for a long time. So the earliest collectors decided, oh, well, the Joker's the most interesting card. We'll just take the Joker out of every deck because you don't need the Joker to play a lot of games. And so Jokers are often missing from older card decks. And that makes a big difference now because playing cards have become rather collectible. And there are some very valuable ones, particularly when you get back to things from the Victorian era or things that advertise interesting places, interesting events. This definitely counts as that. A lot of these ships were then decommissioned after the war and became cruise ships like the President Roosevelt that we saw earlier, or became cargo ships, or were sent off to the new country of the Philippines to be part of their naval fleet. And so a lot of these ships were only around for a brief period of time. I just think this is really dramatic and interesting. It could appeal to someone who collects Second World War memorabilia, someone who had an ancestor who worked for this company, or just somebody who finds playing cards and gambling devices of interest because there are a lot of people who do collect. So there's, again, several different customers, and one of the things I look for when I'm putting things on eBay is, are there more than one group of collectors who look for this? And the more groups of collectors there are, the more likely you are to be able to sell. So I think this is going to be interesting for someone. We're starting it at just $9.99. We do have a buy it now, and the buy it now is $30 because we do see decks of cards like this selling for that much. We're going to put this out now and see which of those collector categories ends up with it. Well, Easter is coming, and if you look at the Antique Nomad live channel, you'll see where I sold another one of these recently because I had a few come to me at the same time. They are really cool. They are Fenton, and they are bunnies on nest. We know hens on nests are very popular, but the bunny is a scarcer and more interesting, more detailed design in a lot of ways because Fenton really decorated them heavily. And this one has an unusual gray contrast to it. Most of these are actually painted in a lighter, more custardy looking color. This one was done originally a few decades ago. At the time when it was new, it sold for $89. This one still has its original price tag. Again, the dark gray is an unusual color treatment for these. And this one is signed by both artists. And when I say both artists, that's because for this particular one, they had more than one artist involved. Mike Husk did the airbrushing. And so the color of the bunny and these light colors that sort of drift into each other, that's your airbrush. And then the details were painted by R. Stewart. So the gold on the eggs, for example, the pupil of the eye. So it was a team effort on this. A lot more effort went into the bunnies on the nest than a lot of the other Fenton pieces, even the other artware lines. This one is about 7.5 inches by 5 by 5. So it's a great size for the table. Easter is coming and he's very cute. So he is ready to hop on into someone else's life, and we will have him there in plenty of time to be on the Easter table. This one is starting at $59.99, which is $30 less than it sold for originally. Nowadays, they typically sell for, with this unusual color treatment, as much as $30 more than the original price. So we'll see where in that range it ends up now that we're putting it out on eBay auctions. All of these auctions are 10 days. Auctions are 10 days, and there's a few reasons for that. First of all, we like putting this out to our members and then to all of our viewers so that the people who watch and are not able to come to my antique mall spaces or my shows are able to have an opportunity to buy some of the neat things that I find in my travels. Secondly, eBay auctions is a great place to find out right now what the value of these things in the marketplace is. Markets go up, markets go down. Sometimes it depends who sees it. But if you have an interesting piece and it's a little bit unusual and you're not sure how to price it, but you have a general idea like we do with this because it had the original price tag with it, well, sometimes the eBay auctions are just the way to go because you let the market tell you. I have often gotten more than I expected for things because I didn't try to guess what the market would bear. Occasionally I get less. That's the chance you take. And it's fun for everybody to get to see how that works out. And you can follow along. The links are in the description below this video. For many years I was mistaken and thought this had something to do with the Ford gum banks because I thought it couldn't possibly be Ford Motor Company. It doesn't have a Ford logo on it. Well, guess what? It turns out these were put out for the benefit of Ford dealers in the Los Angeles area, particularly Galpin Ford. I also have one of these that has their name on it. They made a deal with the company, and it's hard to read, but you may catch under the rather heavy glaze. Florence Ceramics, of all companies, was the one who made the ceramic for this. Florence made beautiful women figurines. They really didn't do advertising pieces, but the California pottery companies, they were under a little pressure from foreign competition. So they were willing to try some things they hadn't tried before. And Galpin Ford and the local Ford dealers were looking for something besides promotional cars that they could give out. And The Shaggy Dog was a popular movie in theaters around that time, and they thought, let's make a bank. We'll have the Shaggy Dog. It'll save Ford. You save up your money, and you start saving for the down payment on your new Ford Thunderbird or whatever cool car you were going to buy. It's just very cute. Such a great expression. Florence Ceramics really was very good. The quality was really good. So they're expressive. They're well molded. There's a lot of detail. I think they were fortunate to be able to get a company like Florence to make for them. And there's 3 or 4 different designs in this line. So it's a fun thing if you are a car fan, a dog fan, or an advertising bank fan, you can collect them all. And this particular one was designed by somebody quite notable who did not generally work for Florence, and that is Don Winton. Don Winton and his brother Ross had Twin Winton pottery. But Florence asked him to come and do this piece for them because it was a little more whimsical than the typical things that they sold. They sold lovely lady figurines and figurines of Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. And this needed a touch of whimsy. So Don Winton was the designer. He ended up designing later for Treasure Craft. He ended up designing major sculptures for the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. So a prolific company, a prolific designer, and a prolific car company. All of those things, again, I look for cross-collectability. If you're a Florence Ceramics fan, well, that might be a new story that you didn't know that would make you interested in this. If you are a Ford Motor fan, well, now we know it wasn't the gum company Ford, it was Ford Motor who was involved with this. And if you like fun, whimsical ceramics like Don Winton made, well, then you've got yourself covered here. So, triple collectible. We're starting it at just $19.99. I think these usually sell for about $35. We will put this out there now and see where it goes, but I just think it is really fun and has a surprising story that I did not know until I bought this one. Speaking of surprises, I was in Fort Smith, Arkansas in a recent video, and you folks probably saw me buy this. It is cool as can be. This is Marc Belleaire, and he was a protege of Sasha Brostov's. Obviously, he learned all about the wild styling, the abstraction, very mid-century modern, all hand-painted, good quality. Sasha Brostov gave him his blessing when he said, I want to leave and start my own firm. And they remained friends. And here is the Belair, California signature. But this one is really interesting, not just because of its massive size as a console bowl. This is 15.5 inches by 10 inches. Not just because of all the hand-painted detail, which I find fascinating. It has sort of a native dance aspect to it. And there's a tree, and there's some sort of quiver with some sort of arrows or something in it. But the signature also intrigues me because it's signed Ingle. Just like Matthew Adams signed the Alaska line that he did for Sasha Brostov, Marc Belleaire apparently had some other artists come in and work with him, and this one got to sign this piece. I have not been able to find any research on who Ingle was. If you are a Marc Belleaire fan, and you happen to have seen this signature or know something about Ingle, please let us know in the comments, because we always love to add to our knowledge. But what I do know is this is a really fun piece. It's in great shape, no damage to the feet. It is just a really impressive, fun piece to put out on a table if you are a mid-century decorator, and you can fill it with fruit candy, nuts, glass balls. I mean, anything that you think looks cool, it'll look even cooler on this. This is definitely not one of his usual stock lines, and because of that, we've never seen it before, we've never seen it sell before, and we really don't know exactly what it should sell for, other than to base it on pieces this large that Belleaire did. So we're starting it at $49. We are not putting a buy it now on this. We're going to let the market find the level for this piece, because that way we can all learn together what the market for something as interesting as this and with this double artist attribution might be. In 1905, a Swedish chemist moved to Philadelphia and got a job with Atlantic Richfield, the oil and gas and chemical refining company. He met a lovely woman named Sadie Dexter, who was my great-great-grandmother, and the result was their wedding and my great-grandfather. Unfortunately, Sadie Dexter died in childbirth, and as a result, Ernst Magnus Johansson went back to Sweden. And this piece reminded me of him because it is indeed from the Atlantic Richfield Company. A little bit after his time. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is a letter opener. It shows an early Arco refinery truck. Arco, by the way, is the remains of the Atlantic Richfield Company, which ended up being a big thing on the West Coast, interestingly enough. This letter opener has the truck on both sides of it. The letter opener itself has been used a lot. It definitely has some scrapes and scratches. It's not dented or corroded in any way, though. And it has this really cool early oil truck. And I think that's going to be the thing that sells it, because somebody who is into early automobilia is going to see this and understand how neat it is. and that you just don't really run into these very much anymore. A lot of these would have been thrown into a scrap heap during a war drive, or thrown out when they got old, or when the trucks changed and they wanted to update their marketing. I'll pull it back so you can see the overall condition. I have to admit, because of my family history, I was tempted to keep it, but it is a little bit after my great-great-grandfather's time there. And so I thought it needed to go to somebody else who would appreciate it for other reasons. Petroliana is very collectible right now, and Automobilia is too. So I think this has potential to do very well. We're starting it at just $19.99. We're not doing a buy it now because I haven't seen any of these come onto the market with this particular design on it. And I think that this is a good design in a good collecting category. So we'll see how it does together right now. Well, fast forward to about 1970, in this case 1971, and you'll find that methods of transportation had changed a lot, and so had mores, because this comic came out, and it was number 2 in a series. These comics came out about a year apart from each other, number 1 and 2, because they were counterculture comics, written for adults, often with sexual or drug-related themes, and oftentimes either violating copyright laws of other publications or having their own trouble with being violated and their designs taken away from them and used by other people. This was right around the end of the hippie era, and the attitudes were, well, gee, it's free for everybody, right? On the one hand, and on the other hand, oh my goodness, this is scandalous and we shouldn't be allowing this. So there were lots of lawsuits all over the place. So-and-so stole so-and-so's design, or this is blasphemous, or violates somebody else's copyright. So these publications were hard to get out the door. Dave Sheridan was the fellow behind this particular publication. And you can see there's a lot of detail in these publications. And the cartoons are very thick with psychedelic influenced drawings, advertising for other publications, and a rather sardonic look at society and the way things were, as you see by There's No Hope. There is hope. You definitely can tell the era this is made in because of the psychedelic colors, also the chopper. The chopper was a new favorite design for motorcycles. Three-wheel choppers were very popular around 1970 with the Hells Angels and other biker gangs. It's funny because we think nowadays of Harley riders as being 60-year-old doctors and people who have made it in life and just love the feel of the open road. But bikers back in 1970 were a pretty fearsome group. And so this would not have been for everybody, that's for sure. And because of that, they were published in very low numbers. They were mostly distributed in big cities, especially on the West Coast. This was done in San Francisco. The condition of this is really, really excellent. There's not bumping or tears. It's pretty close to fully immaculate. Some of the illustrators included Greg Irons and Tom Vetch, who were famous later for other things. So this was a pretty seminal publication, even though it was number 2 in the series. We are starting it at $45. I've seen closed sales for these as high as $65 to $75. There's absolutely a generation of collectors who were kept from these when they were teenagers and young adults who are looking for them now. There's also a younger generation who thinks it's kind of fascinating to see what grandma and grandpa were up to. Nowadays, we associate micro-mosaic jewelry with Italy. And this particular set was made in Italy shortly after the Second World War. However, these styles with the mosaics go back to Byzantine times. All of these little pieces of glass had to be set using tweezers or other implements and then glued in. This one has a very nice rose pattern. It is a pin and earrings on the original card, so these were never used. The popularity of this in Italy peaked in Rome in the 1870s and then had a big comeback right before and right after World War II. And there are a lot of collectors of micro-mosaic jewelry now. What's amazing to me is just like rhinestones in American costume jewelry, somebody was paid piecework rate to sit there as fast as they could and put all of these in and follow a design. There's the part of the card that says Made in Italy. Here's the pin. It's about 1 3/8 round. This is early post-war, so it does not have a safety catch. The idea was that you were going to wear it this way, and that way you have the flower in the center and the shaft is pointing down so you won't lose the piece. And underneath the earrings, the card says Real Mosaic. And it certainly is real with all of those little glass pieces, all connecting it together and making these great, fun, very vivid, bright designs. We are starting this set at just $9.99. Sets like this typically sell for $30 to $35 for me. We're going to find out together what the interest in this is now. I love dealer plaques from old store displays because they're interesting to have if you're a collector of something to put with your pieces as part of your display. They're also more difficult to find because a dealer might only need 1 or 2 of these in a store to go with a set of china, say, as opposed to thousands of pieces of china to sell. And so that's why you don't see these very often. This particular one is for Syracuse China. Syracuse was part of the Onondaga China Company that started in the 1870s, and over the course of time they adopted the Syracuse name as their brand name. At one time they made a lot of very nice fine china patterns that were sold for elegant living in American households, and this dealer plaque would have been amongst those displays of china patterns in some sort of a nice home store. It's in perfect shape, no chips or cracks. This is going to date to about 1960 approximately, based on the style of the transferware, the colors, and the shape. And that was about 10 years before Syracuse disappeared from the American fine china market and decided that they were strictly going to make restaurant ware, which they had also made for many years and turned out to be more lucrative and kept them in business for about another 30 years. So a good choice on their part, but a sad thing that we lost their wonderful fine china. And so for somebody who collects some of their patterns, this might be the perfect thing to go with their collection. Some people also just like to collect dealer plaques. I know someone who has something like 30 or 40 treasure craft dealer plaques that go with their treasure craft pieces. So there are various reasons to collect these. I was really glad to find it. I just don't see very many dealer plaques anymore. And this one is starting at just $9.99. But we're not putting a buy it now on it because typically these sell for anywhere from $25 to $50 depending on the interest in who sees them at a particular time and wants them to go with their collection. And we haven't seen one of these sell in quite a while. So I don't really know what the current value is, and that's part of the reason we're using eBay auctions. Well, if you've followed me for a while, you know I really enjoy World's Fairs. And I haven't had anything to show from a World's Fair for a while. And I thought this very small piece was interesting enough to put out because of what it represents. This, as you see on the globe side, is advertising the Keystone Watch Case Company, meaning this company didn't make watches, they made the cases that you saw in the jeweler's store, and you would pick your Keystone case to go with your watch. Keystone cases were one of the most popular ones of the era. They made gold filled as well as real gold as well as silver tones, and they were out of Pennsylvania. And they had a display at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, which was the Chicago World's Fair, a giant World's Fair on the shores of Lake Michigan, full of wonderful industrial exhibitions. And why did they give these out? Well, it was a fob. You could put your keys on it. But the most important thing is that base there. This is a watch lifter. This is so that you could gently pry open the clamshell cases where they just shut on each other and clip rather than screwing on and off. And it was something you didn't want to use a pocket knife for because you might scratch the piece when you were opening it. But you use this little watch lifter. It was made to just slide in between the two halves of the watch case, and then you pop it open. These are very handy. I actually have one that I carry with me because if I find an old pocket watch that opens that way, well, that's really the only safe way to do it. And because of that, and because of the 1893 World's Fair interest, this particular watch fob actually sells pretty well. These little tiny things that were given away that probably cost all of a few cents back in 1893 are now selling for about $25 to $30. So we're going to put this out and see whether it goes to a World's Fair collector or a watch collector, because it could be a very needful thing for a watch collector and a fun thing for a World's Fair collector to have. When I started selling in Kentucky in the Midwest, I really began to find out how popular crocks are. Crocks and jugs and things made of crockery, and particularly if they have to do with liquor and if they are pre-prohibition. Before 1919 on a national basis and before about 1916 in certain states that adopted it early, well, you would go to the liquor store and you would buy something like this from the Lobby Liquor House. This is from sometime around 1900 to 1910. This particular place is advertising that they have imported wines, assorted liquors and cigars, and they are in Lead, South Dakota. Pretty famous town because of being a big part of the Old West and the legend and lore. It's also a big tourist attraction these days because it's near Sturgis and the Black Hills, and they get a lot of people going through there. It was a very small place. It still is, really. And so to find this from a South Dakota maker, original from the day, in really very good condition. There's just one little rub spot right here. That's from the kiln when they lifted it up, and it took a little bit of the glaze with it. And there is one unobtrusive chip on the shoulder right here. But it does not leak. It does not have any serious damage, no cracks that are going to grow. And it is from a place that is so storied in the Old West and such an obscure liquor store that no doubt was gone by the time of Prohibition, that this could be a rather valuable piece. In the little town I'm in Kentucky, Dawson Springs, water was the big thing. It was a water spa, and water jugs like this from that little town sell for over $100. So I am curious to see how this does. This is one of those things, there's none out there for sale. We haven't seen this sell. We haven't seen anything related to the Lobby Liquor House. And so we have to believe that this is pretty scarce and pretty cool. And there are a lot of people who collect not just crockery, but pre-prohibition liquor-related items. So we're going to give this a whirl. And that same story applies to our next item. But this was something you would do for fun while you were having a drink. This is a tiny little booklet of playing cards. They were called the Little Duke toy cards, and they made these probably until the 1920s. They are miniatures. They fit easily in a little vest pocket. This is a nice leather-clad gilded metal holder, an original. And these were given out by the Palace Saloon for Christmas of 1902. Compliments of Andrew Zerflua, who was the proprietor, as it says there, of the Palace Saloon in Nekoosa, Wisconsin, a very small town, a lumber town. There's a little bit of the town still there. It's still functioning as a town, but this place, of course, is long gone because Prohibition came along and laid it and all the other saloons to waste. So another interesting pre-Prohibition piece. I love that it has the date. It's also very nice that it has some good graphics. And yes, it has the Joker. Like I said, Jokers are very important, so it's great that that's there. The only little bit of damage is the corner of the 8 of Hearts is missing. Other than that, it is absolutely complete. They have some soiling from being used, but they're not bent and they're not damaged other than the one card. The juxtaposition of gambling with a pre-Prohibition saloon is something we really don't see very often. And I think that that makes these rather special. We're going to start these at $19. Again, we don't have a buy it now on these because they are so unique to a place. This may be the only deck of these that he gave out in 1902 that are still in existence, for all that we know. So we're going to see what the market thinks of that. I think they're really wonderful. When my sister graduated from high school, my parents bought her a 1962 Rambler. And I thought Ramblers were really, really cool and asked what happened to them. Well, they had turned into American Motors. And here is an early American Motors key fob, early in terms of this logo. This logo was used in 1968, the year the Javelin came out. And shortly after that, AMC developed a new, rather generic logo and typeface that became their hallmarks for the rest of their production. American Motors started out in the early 1900s as various other companies, but they were not American Motors until 1954 when Nash bought Hudson. And the idea was eventually that they were going to merge with Studebaker-Packard and make a big company to rival the big three. Well, that never actually came to fruition. American Motors was doing very well with its small car, the Rambler, and eventually that became the focus of the company. And by the late 60s, they wanted to expand, and so they started really emphasizing American Motors rather than the Rambler brand name. And this little key fob from an old AMC car was one of the early ones trying to rebrand the company. So it's just a little guy about 1.25 inches. It has usual wear from use. I just love to think of somebody running in one of those hot Javelins going 100 miles an hour with this dangling from the ignition. I know that there are a lot of people besides me who think orphan cars are really fun. Orphan car meaning the company that made them is no longer in business. American Motors ended up owning Jeeps, and then Chrysler bought American Motors in 1987, largely to get the Jeep brand. So that was the end of a wonderful 85-year production run. This AMC logo design did not last very long. We're only asking $9.99 starting bid on this. Somebody out there who has an affinity and an affection for the wonderful cars that they made in the 60s will recognize it and want it for their keys. We have one more small item to sell and then two things that are very large. This very delicate and beautiful sterling piece is a tea strainer spoon. This is going to date to sometime in the 1890s. I have not been able to figure out the pattern name or the company that made them. There were a lot of American companies, and this does appear to be American by the sterling mark that you see right above my finger there. A lot of the companies that were making sterling then came and went, and because of that, unless they're a big one like Gorham or Toll, we really have a hard time identifying the makers today. But it is just lovely with all of the interweaving. This was the era where tableware was supposed to be really fancy, and you had a different piece for every purpose. Why a tea strainer spoon instead of a regular teaspoon? Well, first of all, you had to strain out the tea leaves, but secondly, it was really fun for Victorians to have lots of fancy things on the table, and they were also very concerned about germs. They had learned about microbes, and they realized that a lot of people were passing diseases and illness between each other at the dinner table. And so there started to be elaborate serving pieces where you didn't put your knife in the butter, you put the master butter knife in the butter, you put it on a butter pat, then you took your little butter paddle and you spread it on the bread, for example. And so if you were serving tea, well, everybody would have one of these rather than having to strain out of the teapot and share. You each had your own little piece. Sterling is very, very popular right now with collectors because the prices have gone up. The intrinsic value of this, even though it's really maybe only somewhere in the half-ounce range, the intrinsic value of this alone is somewhere around $17 just because of that. But people value them more highly than that because of the elegance and the design. We are starting it at just $9.99, well below the actual value of the sterling. And we have a buy it now of $24 because that's where we see elegant pieces like this generally selling. So we're going to put this out there now. If I have overlooked something and someone out there does know the pattern name, which would be identified by the pattern on the handle, well, please leave a comment and then we'll let everybody know. These last two items are two of the biggest things that I've ever attempted to ship through eBay sales. This one is Thomas Kinkade, the painter of light. Thomas Kinkade came to an unfortunate demise about 20 years ago, but he was so popular up until then. He really captured what Fox and Parrish and a lot of the other people who did this kind of work understood about using light and perspective and painting beautiful gardens and scenes that people wanted to immerse themselves in. This one, as you see on the bottom, is called the Garden of Prayer. It has its authenticity badge. It has information on the back of the frame talking about the various painting that had to be done to achieve it, and also showing a 1999 date. This was right at the peak of his popularity. The Garden of Prayer referred to the fact that he was a devout Christian and expressed that in his work and his signature, but the popularity was absolutely secular. There were hundreds of Thomas Kinkade galleries at the peak. There is still one not far from where I'm standing right now that still has a giant sign saying Thomas Kinkade is a featured artist. He was arguably the most successful commercial artist to find success during his lifetime in American history and possibly in the history of art. Because he came to a sad end, he was a subject of ridicule for a period of time, and the popularity of these really went away. Now we're seeing where a new generation remembers grandparents having these and are much more fond of them, and we are seeing a rebound in the popularity of these pieces. And notice how it really changes depending on how much light you have on it. Very pretty colors. This one's starting at $99. It weighs 16 pounds. It's 33 inches in the frame. So it's going to cost some money to ship, but we can do it.
And our last piece for this listing is super cool and super big and has a case that will be sent with it. And it is this. A genuine Gibson Sunset Finish ES-150 version 2. This is a Spanish style guitar, but it is electric acoustic. Gibson gets a lot of credit for taking acoustic guitars and electrifying them. They came out with the Super 400 all the way back in 1936. It was called the Super 400 because it cost $400, which was a giant amount of money back then. That same year, they came up with the ES-150, which cost $150, which was $3,400 in modern day terms, so still a lot of money. And this is the version 2, which was made in the late 40s and early 50s. It has one single electric pickup at the top. They were revised in the mid-50s to have 2 electric pickups. So this is a middle period piece. It's got the sunset finish. It is in wonderful condition. No cracks, no bending at the neck. All the strings are there, lovingly taken care of. And there's the Gibson logo at the top. My guitar days are long behind me, but it is a beautiful instrument, and it would sound much better if it actually was plugged in. I don't have a speaker anymore to put with it, but somebody out there does. This is a really good instrument, and this one was made about the time that they were working with Les Paul to do the first solid body electric guitar. But this one was called the ES because it's the electric Spanish guitar. A little thinner, a little more lively than an orchestral guitar, and that made it very popular in its time, along with the $150 price, which was still a ton of money, but less than half of what the Super 400 cost. They made only about 1,500 of these over a 20-year period, so they are not easy to find, and today they typically sell somewhere in the $1,500 to $2,500 range. This one is going out at a buy it now of $1,850 or best offer. I am curious to see how fast it will sell, but I have a feeling it's going to be pretty fast. And it does have its hard case with it. So it's a nice complete package for somebody who is a serious musician. I'm so delighted to be able to bring this to you all to see, and it's going to be really fun to send it off to somebody who will love it and use it. I used to know a lot of musicians back then. I would have just picked up the phone and this would have been gone. But now we're going to put it on eBay because we're going to let them find it, along with all these other wonderful things that we've gotten to show you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so fun to come up with these different objects and have such a great range. I just love the variety of things in the antique and vintage world. And I'm just so thrilled to see who ends up with things and what it is that motivates them to collect these wonderful items from the past. So have fun, check out the listings. The links are in the description of this video, and you can click on them and go to them and see how the item is doing in the marketplace, or if it's already sold. You can go take a look at my completed listings and get an idea of what things sold for under the Antique Nomad on eBay. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again with more cool stuff soon.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.